Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are on Lesson 23, Chapter 23, which is all about controlling flow with conditions and loops. What we're going to learn about in this lesson is how to test conditions with the if statement, how to use comparison operators to compare values, how to use logical operators to combine conditions, how to use alternative conditions with else, how to create expressions with conditional operators, how to test for multiple conditions, how to perform repeated statements with the for loop, how to use while and do while loops, how to create infinite loops and why you shouldn't, how to escape from loops and continue loops, and how to loop through an array's properties. Statements in JavaScript generally execute in the order in which they appear, one after the other. So sometimes that order isn't always practical, so that's why programming languages actually provide flow control statements that let you control the way your code is executed. First, this chapter is going to talk about the if statement. So the if statement is the main conditional statement in JavaScript. And it means just like it sounds in English. If something happens, then do this. The book gives you an example. If phone rings, answer it. So the statement consists of two parts. The condition, which was if the phone rings, and the action, answer it. The book gives you an example of a basic if statement and the syntax of that and how to declare that. Then it talks about conditional operators, which is the action part of an if statement can include any of the JavaScript statements that you've already learned, such as if a variable named x equals 10. If it does, print this. So between the two values to be compared is a conditional operator. It gives you a list of these conditional operators. You can test if something is equal to, not equal to, if something is less than or equal to, or less than or equal to. Your book then goes through and teaches you how to combine conditions with logical operators. An additional logical operator is the AND operator. So you can say, if two conditions are true, then do this. So in your if statement, you could say, if the phone rings and you get an email, then do this alert, right? So you're combining these two conditions and you're connecting them with the AND operator, which is the double ampersand. Then talks about the else keyword. So if the phone rings, answer it, else go back to bed. So this is an additional feature of the if statement. Else tells the JavaScript interpreter what to do if the if condition is not met. It also goes and shows you how to use shorthand conditional expressions, which is the same as those if-else statements, but the syntax is a little different and a little shorter. You can also test multiple conditions with if-else. If the time of day is less than 10 o'clock, display good morning. Else if it's after 2 o'clock but before 5 o'clock, display good afternoon. Else if it's after 5 o'clock or 5 o'clock, display good evening. And then else, display good day. So it's testing multiple conditions with the if, else if, and then else. The book works through this example of an HTML file and then gives you a time greeting. And depending on what time it is, it will display a different greeting, and it does so with the if, else, if statements. It also teaches you how to test multiple conditions with the switch statement. It tells you some benefits on why that would be useful. Then it goes through and talks about for loops. For loops are the most common type of loops in any programming language. The for keyword is the first tool to consider when creating these loops. The for loop typically uses a variable called a counter, an index, to keep track of how many times the loop is executed. And it stops when the counter reaches a certain number. The book gives you basic syntax of a for loop. So for, set a counter variable. As long as this variable is less than this, then you increment that variable by 1, and then every iteration you do something in the code. The for loop has 3 parameters: the initial expression, which is the variable that you're setting, an initial value, the condition, which is the second parameter that must remain true to keep the loop going, and then the increment expression, the third parameter, and it's a statement that executes with every iteration of the loop and adds 1 or subtracts. It also talks about using while loops and do while loops. What's the difference? What's the benefits of using them? And when? It talks about how you can accidentally create an infinite loop. So since for and while loops gives you really a lot of control over these loops, you can actually accidentally create an infinite loop if you make it so a condition is never met or could never be met. To make sure you avoid this or always have in a way that you can escape from the loop. It tells you how to use a break statement to escape from a loop. You can also use if statements inside your for loop to continue a loop, and you can also loop through object properties. So the core of this lesson and chapter is learning about if statements, if, else statements, and for loops, while loops, and do while loops. Coming up next, I'm going to share my screen with you and show you some examples of what this looks like. Here's an example called time greet example. It displays the current date and time when you reload it. And then it says good evening. If you look at this, and like I usually say, this should be an external JavaScript file. I commented this out here and put the JavaScript inside because it's easy to show you an example all in one file so you can see all the code here and all the code here. But you should have your JavaScript in a separate file. So how are we getting it to display the current time with this text that says good evening because it's nighttime? Well, we're getting the current date now equals new date. We're splitting it into hours, minutes, and seconds. We're displaying the time. First, we need to open the paragraph, document.write, open the paragraph, and then here's where it closes the paragraph, and then it will write either good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good day using the if statement. If, else if, else if. So if the hour of the day is less than 10, it's going to display good morning. Else if it's greater than or equal to 14 and less than or equal to 17, it will display good afternoon. If it's greater than or equal to 17, it will display good evening, which is why it's displaying good evening in here. Else, it displays good day. So we're using an if-else. If statements here, we're using the document.write, and we're using the date object that we learned. Next example is using a for loop. So in here, we have our basic for loop. For I equals 1, I less than 10, I plus plus, document.write, this is line plus I. So the first iteration is going to go through. We set I to 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes. So we're going to say document.write, this is line, now remember I is 1, it's going to say this is line 1, and then add a break. Now it's going to go I plus plus, so now I is going to be 2. So I'm going to say, is I, which is 2, less than 10? Yes. Document.write, this is line, I is now 2. Then it's going to go I plus plus, so 2 becomes 3. Now, I is 3. Is 3 less than 10? Yes. Document.write, this is line 3. Then it's going to go I plus plus, so 3 is now going to become 4. Let me go back here. 4, is it less than 10? So this will do this, and it'll display, this is line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It displays lines 1 through 9 because on the 10th line, I is 10, and then it says, is I less than 10? No, it's not, so then it exits the loop. So that's why if you wanted to display 10 lines, you would have to change this to 11, or say less than or equal to 10. And then if we save this and reload it, it would display this. Now we could put whatever we want here, and it would display every time, but this is how we get a loop to work, and in every iteration of the loop, it prints out some text. Let's work on this loop with the name prompt. So, same thing, external JavaScript would go here, but instead I'm putting it in here. We're going to go through and enter a series of names, and JavaScript will display them in a numbered list. So let's actually see what happens first. I'm going to load the page, enter name. So if I say Brad, okay, Fred, Tom, Jim. Okay, and then if I hit cancel, I say Brad, Fred, Tom, Jim. So how does that happen? Well, first I create the array. Names equals new array. Set I equal to 0. I'm going to loop and prompt for names. So do this, right? While this. So next equals window.prompt, enter the next name. If next is greater than blank, names I equals next, I equals I plus 1, while next is greater than an empty string. Document.write h2 plus names.length. Names.length is 4. names entered. Display all the names. Document.write. So it's going to write the OL tag for the list, and then it's going to say for I in names, document.write li plus names at position I. So for every name, it's going to write in between li tags. And then we're going to close the list, document.write OL, close the list, pre-reload. All right, I hope those examples helped. Coming up next, we have our lesson 23 PowerPoint presentation, so stay tuned.